Hollywood's biggest night has just wrapped up, and Anora has come out on top in what is a dominant fashion. Nominated for 6 Oscars, won 5 of them. That is a huge percentage. And Sean Baker, the director, writer, editor, and producer of this film, won huge. This is a guy who just won 4 Oscars in one night. The only other person who has achieved that is Walt Disney back in like 1954, and Walt Disney won that on 4 separate films that he produced. Sean Baker has made history, and I am already seeing the divisiveness of Anora coming out. So today I wanted to explore 10 reasons how and why Anora went on to win Best Picture at the 97th Academy Awards. And let's not dilly-daddle, let's just get into this. Coming in at number 10, the reason Anora won Best Picture, and I think you just need to kind of look at the competition this year and specifically what ended up losing and some of the bigger controversies of this year. And I am, of course, referring to Emilia Perez. I want to get this one out of the way earlier, but I do think it is worth talking about. It is the Emilia Perez downfall that made this Oscars race chaotic. Emilia Perez was nominated for 13 Oscars and ended up winning 2 for Best Supporting Actress and Best Original Song. However, what ended up really happening was when the Carlos Sofia Gascon tweets came out, which if you're not aware of essentially what happened, the main star of this film had just horrendous tweets coming out from like the past decade, but also fairly recently, and it just imploded Emilia Perez. The buzz around this movie was so bad post its Oscar nominations, and it really just imploded this film really having any chance at winning major awards. And I think you saw that today. And what happens is you just took the film that was the most nominated, the most celebrated in the nominations, and it went out. Besides Zoe Saldana, besides Song, this film was a blank. And when you have that, you leave room for other films to step up, and I think Anora got that. The love that the Academy clearly had for Emilia Perez, they did not show it today. Number 9, reason that Anora won Best Picture. And I want to really focus on this one because I think it is important. I think this is a reoccurring theme that you'll see in my next few points. This is an important movie, specifically in the time that it came out in Hollywood's history. And by that, I mean, you have to remember last year in 2023, or I guess it was 2 years now, SAG and WGA were on strike. It shut down Hollywood basically for months. And these were the films that they were championing. These were the films that were able to come out of this. This is The Artist. This is a film that is personal. This is a film that really uses SAG actors. Like, this is a film that gets a lot of small performers. This is a film that is a writer's dream. Like, so much of this is a time when so much of those strikes were about championing indie cinema and these films, these mid-budget, these smaller budget films that don't really exist in the conglomerate that is franchise filmmaking. Anora stands against that. And it is kind of a reminder of what these strikes were, why they were important, what was being championed, what is at risk of being lost without the support of actors, without the support of writers. Like, it is a moment to, again, remember and to kind of honor those films, and kind of, again, just a moment of like, we still care about these movies. We still love these movies. It is a way to champion indie cinema. And with that, I want to bring that, because that brings me to my 8th point, indie cinema. And I think it's a huge thing to remember. Indie cinema has been dominant at the Oscars, especially really since the 1990s. But of the past 10 years, let's just go through the history of the Academy Awards the past 10 years. Last year, we had Oppenheimer. The year before, we had Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was a small film that made a lot of money for A24. The year before that, you had Coda, which was a small indie film picked up by Apple. Year before that, Nomadland, which was a weird year because of COVID. Parasite. Year before that, Green Book. Then year before that, you had The Shape of Water, Moonlight, Spotlight, Birdman. Like, these are very untraditional Best Picture winners. You're not seeing these huge mega films coming in and winning it. Like, Oppenheimer is an example of kind of the traditional Academy. These are very different types of films to win it. And I think that does just show what Hollywood has progressed to and wants to celebrate and reward. And I think this is a huge thing that happens. Blockbusters have their purpose. They have their reason. You see it in Wicked this year. You saw it in Barbie last year. You saw it in Top Gun Maverick. But when it comes to rewarding, and Oppenheimer is a weird case last year because obviously that was a film that had a lot of artistic integrity and also was a huge billion-dollar movie because of who Christopher Nolan is. But I think you still look at that in a film like Anora represents, again, what Hollywood can be and what the Academy wants to celebrate and what it doesn't want to celebrate. And I think that came through again today. Number 7, the reason why Anora won Best Picture, and I think it is a huge reason to think of it, is this was just clearly a dominant movie. People very clearly loved this movie. 5 out of 6, that doesn't happen unless there is a huge fan fervor within the Academy. Best Picture, Actress, Original Screenplay, Editing, Director. Only 1 loss in cinematography. Like, that is really important because, and that will come back to my point that we'll make at number 1, this does show a love for this film. And a love is a really big thing when we come to ranked voting, which we'll get to in a second. But Anora clearly had fan fervor, and it clearly had that within the Academy when I know a lot of people weren't necessarily predicting that. I do think that is a big thing that I think for me, when I knew Anora was going to win Best Picture, and when I knew Sean Baker, the director, was going to win directing and make history tonight, is when he won editing, where I'm like, oh, okay, this is clearly somebody that the Academy, it is their time to celebrate this guy, and they want to reward this type of movie. And I think that's a big deal. And let's just skip to my number 6 point, which is Sean Baker and the fact of what he did tonight. This is a movie that could make history, and the Academy chose to make history today. 4 wins in one night. Here is a piece of trivia. Leave it in the comments section if you know it. I said the person earlier, Walt Disney, won 4 Oscars in one night, 4 different films. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. You can pause the video right now. Name those 4 films. I doubt any of you will get it. If you guys get it, honestly, you should be hosting this channel instead, because this is the craziest trivia question I've ever heard. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can pause this so you don't have to deal with my fast countdown. Here are the 4. Documentary feature, The Living Desert. Documentary short, The Alaskan Eskimo. Cartoon short, Toot, Whistle, Plunk, and Boom. And true real short, Bear Country. That is the only other person who has won 4 Oscars in one night. And I know some of you might be thinking like, well, didn't Bong Joon-ho do it? Because he won writer, he won director, he got picture, and then international. Technically, yes, he did go on stage 4 times. International goes to the country, and he was able to represent the country in accepting it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Bong Joon-ho left with that. Sean Baker has 4 Oscars in his possession that are engraved Sean Baker. That is significant, and I think I'm a sports guy. You can't see my background. I have so many Sacramento Kings things in my background. I am somebody who takes narratives really seriously, especially in voting, because I think of how people vote for sports awards, whether it's NBA, all NBA, whether it's football awards, like all that. A lot of it comes down to narratives. And I think of it as my sports brain thinking of it this way. And it was just like people had the chance to make history today and essentially be like, yeah, we're going to make history because Sean Baker is going to win 4 in one night. We're making a statement. We want to support this guy. That is a narrative. And I think that narrative really came through. It clearly came through because he won 4. So I think that cannot be underrated, the narrative of supporting Sean Baker and the historic achievement of which Anora was able to pull off. Very few films have the opportunity to pull this off. This film did. This film had the year to do it, and they rewarded it that way. Number 5, and it needs to be focused on Sean Baker, this man right here, who I had never heard speak before tonight, but he really gained a fan in me tonight because he is an ambassador. He is a champion of cinema. He is somebody that thinks, that cares, that puts so much thought and love into the movie making experience and also audiences enjoying movies. This is a guy who spent his time talking about the rights of artists, like what making movies like this means, but also what getting to enjoy movies like this. I think when he won Best Director, he spent basically a good chunk of his time championing the movie going experience. That is important, especially in this time in Hollywood where streaming is killing theatrical releases, where there's so much where these theater chains are hurting, this guy stood up to this. And this is a guy that Hollywood clearly has a fondness for. Besides receiving nominations for the Florida Project, he is somebody that made such great films as Tangerine, Red Rocket. Like, there is clearly a love. There's people who work with Sean Baker. There are clearly people who are impressed with him. This was not a guy who just came out of nowhere. He has been putting in the work for a decade plus. And I think he really served himself the past few weeks in his wins, and specifically tonight, he is an ambassador of the movie going experience. And I think people bought into that. I think people were charmed by that. I myself, watching it, never knowing really who this guy looked like, what he sounded like until today, I was really charmed with what he had to say. And I liked getting to see him take the stage each time. With that said, I actually think had this film Anora came out next year, he would have made even bigger history as being the guy who wins 5 Academy Awards in one night, because had this film come out in 2026, he would have won 5, because if I'm right, he cast his own films. And the next year, they're bringing in the casting ensemble. And not casting ensemble, the best casting director, whatever that award is going to be called. Sean Baker cast his films, and I think that is an important thing. And specifically, that came through because Sean Baker discovered a talent in Mikey Madison. And as Sean Baker wisely said on his stage when Quentin Tarantino handed him, he is there. Anora is because of Quentin Tarantino discovering Mikey Madison as the actress, and then Sean Baker was able to elevate her. A star is born. Mikey Madison really did become her own actress this year. Like, she really made a name for herself when I really don't think anyone knew her name about a year ago. Maybe some did, not a lot of people did, and she really owned that this year. And I think that is another important thing to this. It's when you can make a star-making performance. People really do respond to a star is born, that feeling, that wonder of that. Like, there is something very powerful, and it's, again, an eye for talent. It's something that Tarantino has done well. It's something that Linklater has done well. It's what all these great directors are able to do, is look at somebody and be like, that is going to be a star, and we need to identify, we need to champion them, we need to build projects around them. That's what Sean Baker did today, and I think that's a big reason why he won. I don't think if he was able, obviously, if he wasn't able to get Mikey Madison and it was another role and the role was lesser and the performance wasn't as good, he does not go on to win like he did today. Him being able to identify and build a film around Mikey Madison and build Anora is significant and should not be underestimated in how he won. Number 3, and the reasons that Anora won big. And I think this is getting a little outside, and I want to bring people in who maybe aren't as familiar with the Oscar processes, but there are all these precursors. Some of them you might know, like Golden Globes, but there's a lot of guild awards. This is like the Screen Actors Guild. This is the Writers Guild of America. This is the Directors Guild. There's BAFTA, which is the British Academy. All of these matter because, and I don't necessarily think it's a correlation. You win this, you end up winning that. Like, we didn't see that really this year. Golden Globes was not particularly predictive. Screen Actors Guild was not predicted. They predicted Chalamet and Demi Moore. That's who they were rewarded last week. Anora peaked at the right time. And let me bring out the history of Anora. It premiered at Cannes in May. It gets its release October, basically right around the election cycle. Golden Globes loss. It goes 0 at the Golden Globes. Ends up picking up a few key awards. BAFTA, Directors Guild, Producers Guild, Writers Guild. It gets a lot of really big key nominations, and it doesn't win SAG. And usually SAG is pretty predictive of who's going to win key awards. Here's a huge thing that I forgot to make note of, and I should have made better note of it. SAG usually happens during the Oscar voting process. So essentially, by the time people cast their ballot for the Oscars, Screen Actors Guild, that award show has already happened. So when somebody like Timothée Chalamet, who I thought gave a great speech, gave it last week, it didn't really matter because the speech happened post-voting being done. And here's where I do think these precursors matter. They are time for you to build a narrative for yourself. They are time for you to basically champion. If someone like Kieran Culkin just came out and just gave one of the worst speeches, I don't think he ends up winning it. If Adrian Brody gave the quality of speech that he gave tonight at the Oscars, back at the Golden Globes, I don't think Adrian Brody goes on to win. Demi Moore got a huge boost because of the quality of speeches that she was giving. I think that's where these precursors matter, is making a name for yourself, making that like ability. And I think that's what Anora did well. Yes, it lost the Golden Globes. I think had it ended up winning the Golden Globes, and then like I think there could have been the case what The Brutalist did, where The Brutalist wins big at the Golden Globes, and it's like, oh, is this the front runner? And then as it goes on, it kind of just fades from relevance in terms of winning Best Picture. Nor did the opposite. It's like, okay, we're going to lull out. We were the front runner. We lost front runner status to the Brutalist. We regained it at the right time, and we played our cards right. I think that's really important, and it should not be underrated. Reason number 2, I think this movie, and I always talk about ideas and what movies represent and what voting for it does. What Anora represents is a movie about class. It is a movie about capitalism. This is how the rich use, this is how the rich abuse, and how the working class has to basically fight for the scraps and are almost made to be tools and made a mockery of by the richest of the rich. And that is essentially what Anora is about. It follows a sex worker who has to make the most for herself. And when she finally gets a chance for generational wealth, she clings onto it. She does everything and she claws and fights. And the movie ends on a devastating note of somebody who kind of loses it all, kind of realizes what her life has been the past few weeks. And it's a pretty traumatic exploration of it, while being also a very funny, lighthearted exploration of it. I think this movie really does just speak to a moment, and I think it is speaking to a lot of young people, which is another really important thing to understand. The Academy has gotten younger. It has gotten more international with some of the changes that came in the past decade. And I think Anora speaks to a lot of people. I know we think of the Academy as being this really rich group of people. You think the Leos, you think the Jack Nicholsons, you think the Tom Hanks, you think the richest of the rich. The Academy is not made up of that. These are a lot of screenwriters who don't always get huge paychecks. These are a lot of production design, musicians, like costume designers who are living paycheck to paycheck. They are doing a job. They don't always receive the recognition. I think this movie is a reminder, and it spoke to a lot of people that way. And reason number 1, Anora won Best Picture. And I think this is honestly the biggest reason. This is why I'm saving it at number 1. It is the most accessible of the 10 films nominated this year. Let's just kind of go through the list. I kind of jotted this down. Emilia Perez was very not accessible. The musical element of this movie, how it was made, how it looked, the style of this movie, how it literally became toxic post the Oscar nomination, how bad the discourse around that did. That was a film that was divisive, to say the least. Nickel Boys is a film that by design is divisive in the first person point of view. The Substance has the horror bias going against it. People are very quick to ignore horror in the Academy. Wicked, blockbuster bias. I've said we saw it with Top Gun Maverick, Avatar, Barbie last year. Like it's a film that is almost there for recognition, gets people in. Maybe it gets a few good wins, but it doesn't ultimately ever seem to go on to win Best Picture outside of a few occasions. And even in those few occasions, they're not like IP driven. Like it's Titanic. It's films like that. Lord of the Rings is one of the few examples where you can say like that truly won Best Picture and was IP. So that's another one. Like, then talk about it. The Brutalist, like that is a movie that is long. It's self-serious. I think people were turned off by Brady Corbet and a lot of those people around it. Like, I think there was an inaccessibility to that movie, and the 3 hour and 45-minute runtime, I think it just rubbed people the wrong way. Dune Part 2, sci-fi bias. That just leaves a few films. That leaves Conclave, which is a very silly movie. It is a very fun movie, but it's not necessarily what I would think is Best Picture worthy. I'm Still Here, which has an international film. It's almost like they rewarded it in international, didn't need to recognize it anywhere. And then A Complete Unknown, which in my mind was always an achievement for the actors. It was never going to win Best Picture, especially if Norton, Barbero, and specifically Chalamet don't go on to win any of those acting nominations. It's almost like more of like it gets in because of how popular it is with the actors, which then again just leaves Anora. And for those who do not know how the voting process now works, it is ranked vote, which means a film that has a lot of votes top ends up winning. So it's maybe like Anora wasn't a lot of people's number one. But what if it was a lot of people's 2 and 3, where some people had Amelia Perez as 1, and then a lot of people had it as 10? Or Dune Part 2, some people had it at 1 or 2, but a lot of people had it at 10. The Substance, 1, 10. Like, you see that divisiveness, like, ends you at like the 5 and 6 kind of as an average, where Nora, think of it, maybe a lot of people had it at 1, a lot of people had it at 2, a lot of people had it at 3, a lot of people had it at 4, a lot of people had it at 5. You average somewhere closer to 3. And then all of a sudden you're not having to deal with that divisiveness. It's just the average, how that works. And I think that actually did come into effect. I would be curious to know if Anora just won this by a lot of people voted at number 1, which I'm sure they did, or if this was a case of this film just ended up being so top heavy in the top 1 through 5 that it wasn't receiving a lot of 8, 9, or 10 in the ranked ballot. I think there were more films that were divisive that were going to take up those bottom slots. That's how I see it. And I think that's why Anora made history. Along with the fact that I just think it's a really good movie. I would encourage people to check it out. I hope people give this movie a chance because I think it is a good one. I think it may have won too many. I don't necessarily know if I agreed with all the wins. I do think it was a bit of a dominant performance for a film that I thought was really good, but not necessarily great. Gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching this channel. I'll be back Thursday. I'll be doing the looking forward again, 2026, the way too early Oscar predictions of 2026. That's one of my favorite videos that I do. So I thank you all for watching this, and I hope you consider subscribing.